The gunshot cracked through Silver Creek like a whip. September 1878. Dust jumped off the street. A horse screamed somewhere near the hitching rail. Inside the general store, every conversation died mid-breath, as if the sound had reached in and squeezed every throat at once. The front door slammed open and a woman stumbled in hard enough to skid on the worn planks. She caught herself on the counter, then slid down anyway, kneeling as if her bones had given up before her will did. Violet. Her dress was torn at the hem, her hand scraped raw, her cheek dark with fresh bruising. She looked like someone who had been running for miles and losing pieces of herself the whole way. Her eyes found the shopkeeper first, then the faces around her, searching for mercy the way a drowning person searches for air. "Please," she choked out. "Help me." "Please." No one moved. Not a single hand reached down. Not a single voice answered. Fear held them in place better than rope. Then the door opened again, slower this time, and 3 men stepped in as if they owned the room. U.S. Marshals, badges bright against dusty coats, revolvers already drawn, already certain. The lead marshal didn't ask who she was. He said her name like a verdict. Violet Ames. Violet jerked backward, trapped between the counter and the wall. The front door was blocked by federal law. The back exit sat too far away, beyond staring eyes that suddenly refused to see her at all. "You're under arrest," the marshal said. "Theft, assault on a federal officer. Hands where I can see them." Violet's mouth opened, but whatever defense she had dissolved into panic. She wasn't fast enough. She wasn't strong enough. And no one here was brave enough to save her. Then a shadow fell across her shoulder. A large hand settled there, steady and possessive in a way that stopped the room cold. A man stepped forward from the edge of the crowd like he'd been there the whole time. Jasper Colton, the blacksmith, the solitary mountain of a man who lived outside town and spoke to almost no one. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for a gun. He simply looked at the marshals and said, calm as iron cooling in a trough, "She's my wife." The lead marshal narrowed his eyes. "No marriage record, not here, not anywhere." "We were married in Utah," Jasper replied. "Last month. Papers haven't been filed yet." Violet's heart hammered so hard it hurt. She swallowed, then forced the lie to become her lifeline. "It's true," she whispered. "I'm his wife." The marshal hesitated, weighing risk against certainty. Finally, he lowered his revolver an inch. "We'll verify. If you're lying, Colton, I'll come back and I'll take you both." They left, the bell over the door jingling like a warning. The store stayed frozen. Violet trembled, barely breathing. Jasper leaned closer, his voice dropping so only she and the audience could feel it. "I lied," he murmured, eyes hard with something darker than kindness, "because I know they won't let you live." He straightened, and the calm in his face sharpened into a demand. "Now, you owe me an explanation. Before we rewind to learn why a lonely blacksmith would risk his life by lying to U.S. Marshals, tell me this. Where are you, and what are you doing as this story begins?" Well, Silver Creek was the kind of town that looked harmless until you lived in it long enough to understand its real weapon. Not a gun, not a knife, a rumor. It sat tucked between low hills and pine scrub, a thin stripe of buildings pressed against the dirt road like they were trying to hide from the wind. A saloon with swinging doors that never truly stopped swinging. A post office that doubled as the only place to hear news from the rail line. a church that filled on Sundays and emptied the moment trouble started. And at the center of it all, the general store where flour, nails, coffee, and gossip were sold with the same casual certainty. In Silver Creek, information traveled faster than any horse. A whispered name could turn into a mob by sunset, and when men wearing U.S. Marshal badges walked into the store and called someone out loud, it didn't matter what the truth was. The town heard only one thing: "You're finished." That was why Violet's collapse on the floor had terrified everyone into stillness. They weren't just watching a stranger beg. They were watching federal law breathe inside their walls, and they knew what happened to the people who got in its way. Jasper Colton should have been the last man to step into that moment. People respected him the way they respected a storm. His forge sat outside town, far enough that you had to mean it when you went there. He didn't drink at the saloon. He didn't linger on the boardwalk. He came in when someone needed a horseshoe, a wagon hinge, a new latch for a door. He spoke in short sentences, got paid, and disappeared back to the edge of the woods where smoke from his chimney rose alone. There were stories about him, because a quiet man in a loud town always collects stories. That he'd killed a bear with a hammer, that he'd once worked for the law and didn't anymore, that his hands were too steady and his eyes too watchful for a man who claimed to want nothing but peace. And there was one detail everyone agreed on because it was so easy to notice. No one had ever seen Jasper Colton near a woman, not in the way that mattered, not in the way that created gossip. No courting, no dances, no lingering smiles, nothing. So when he stepped forward and claimed Violet Ames as his wife, it didn't just confuse the Marshals. It shocked the town so deeply that for a second even fear loosened its grip. Because if Jasper was lying, he wasn't just risking trouble. He was inviting it. And Violet made no sense as a wife to anyone watching. She looked wrecked, dust-ground and exhausted, bruises blooming on her skin like someone had tried to teach her a lesson with their fists. She wasn't carrying a satchel or a plan. She was carrying only desperation. The store's customers stared at her like she was contagious, like the worst kind of trouble that could seep into your life without asking permission. Some of them looked away, already deciding they wanted no part of this. Others watched Jasper, trying to read him, trying to figure out whether this was mercy or some colder calculation. Outside, the three Marshals mounted up without urgency. Their confidence was the kind that didn't come from evidence alone. It came from certainty, from the belief that the world would bend the way they expected it to bend, which raised a question that shouldn't have sat so heavily in the air, but did. If Violet was just a fugitive passing through, how had they reached Silver Creek so fast? How had they known to look for her here, in a town small enough to miss on a map? And why did they walk like they already owned the ending? That night, Violet sat at the rough wooden table inside Jasper's cabin, hands wrapped around a tin cup she hadn't touched. The forge outside had gone quiet. The last glow of iron had faded to dull red, then black. Inside, only lamplight and tension remained. "You said I owe you the truth," Violet began, her voice steadier now, but still carrying exhaustion. "You deserve it." She did not start with the accusation. She started with the loss. In 1875, a wave of fever rolled through Denver and took both her parents within a week. She had been 25, old enough to understand what death meant, and young enough to feel its cruelty like betrayal. With no siblings and no property, she was sent to live with her only remaining relative, Raymond Ames. He was a land broker with polished boots and polished lies. He moved deeds across desks the way other men moved cards across saloon tables. Outwardly generous, privately ruthless. At first, he treated her like a ward to be tolerated, then like unpaid help. Violet kept accounts, copied letters, organized ledgers. It was there she began to notice the irregularities. Parcels sold twice. Titles transferred without proper signatures. Land promised to homesteaders that had already been pledged elsewhere. She confronted him once. "You're stealing from people who have nothing," she told him. Raymond smiled without warmth. "I'm investing in opportunity." Violet didn't stop looking. She copied entries, dates, payments that didn't match the filings at the county office. And then she made the mistake that turned suspicion into danger. She tried to report him. She brought the ledgers to the U.S. Marshal in Denver, believing law meant protection. Instead, she found herself staring into the eyes of a man who recognized the names in those books too well. The marshal was on the take. She realized it too late. Within hours, she was accused of theft, of attacking a federal officer during questioning, of fabricating records to extort her own uncle. The charges spread faster than she could defend herself. Raymond called her unstable, ungrateful, dangerous, and people believed him. So she ran. Her goal was simple and impossible at once. We survived long enough to get the evidence into the hands of someone clean, someone beyond Raymond's reach. Prove she was not a criminal, but a witness. Her fear was deeper, that no one would care, that a woman with bruises and a federal accusation attached to her name would always look more like a liar than a victim. When she finished, silence settled between her and Jasper. He had not interrupted once. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. "You tried to trust the law," he said quietly, "and the law tried to bury you." He stared into the lamplight as if it were showing him something from 10 years ago. "I was a deputy marshal," he said. Violet looked up sharply. "Wyoming Territory," he continued, "under a man named Daniel Harding. I found evidence he was taking bribes from smugglers. I reported it. 2 days later, I was the one in irons, charged with the same crime." Violet's breath caught. "I was supposed to stand trial," Jasper went on. "But I knew how that would end. Harding had friends, money. I would have been convicted before I opened my mouth." "So you ran," she whispered. "I disappeared," he corrected. "Changed my name, learned to swing a hammer instead of a badge." His fear was not of prison. It was of exposure, of someone digging into records and finding the deputy who vanished before sentencing, of being dragged back into a system that protected its own corruption. His goal had been simple for 10 years. Stay quiet, stay invisible, survive. But when Violet had fallen onto the general store floor and heard her name spoken like a sentence, Jasper had seen something he recognized too well: himself. And there was a second truth he did not say out loud. If Violet was captured and interrogated hard enough, the marshals might dig. They might look into anyone who helped her. They might uncover the deputy who had once accused another marshal of corruption. Saving her was not just compassion, it was self-preservation wrapped in conscience. Because if she went down publicly as a liar, the world would be reminded how easily the law could reshape truth. And Jasper Colton could not survive that reminder. Jasper did not offer Violet the comfort of softness. He offered her structure. "You'll stay here?" he said the next morning, standing near the doorway of his forge as light filtered in through the trees. For now. Violet watched him carefully. Up close, he was even more imposing than he had seemed in the general store. Broad shoulders, and thick hands scarred by heat and iron. A man built for labor and silence. She had trusted him because she had no alternative. That did not mean she was not afraid. "You barely know me," she said. "I could be exactly what they claim." Jasper's eyes flicked toward her, calm and assessing. "No," he replied, "you're not." "How can you be sure?" "Because guilty people don't run toward crowded rooms and beg for help. They run away from witnesses." The forge crackled as embers shifted in the ash. Violet swallowed. "I don't have the ledgers anymore," she admitted. "The marshal took them, even if someone believed me. I have no proof." Jasper stepped closer, not threatening, but firm. "I put my neck under a federal gun for you. That wasn't charity." "What do you want?" she asked. "The truth," he said. "All of it. And obedience. If you stay here, you do what I say. You don't wander. You don't talk to strangers. You don't make this harder than it already is." His tone was not cruel. It was practical. Violet held his gaze. "And in return, I keep you alive." The words landed between them without decoration. She considered her options. She had none. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll tell you everything, and I'll follow your lead." That was their agreement. Not romance, not trust, survival. But even as they spoke, Jasper's eyes shifted toward the road beyond the trees. "They'll come back," he said. Violet's spine tightened. "How do you know?" "Men like that don't leave unfinished business, not when a reputation is involved." He stepped outside, scanning the line of pines, the stretch of dirt leading toward town. The wind carried no horses yet, but the air felt unsettled, like it was holding its breath. "And next time," Jasper added, voice lower now, "they won't ask questions. They'll make an example." Violet stepped into the doorway beside him. For the first time since she had run into Silver Creek, she understood something clearly. This was not just about her innocence. It was about power, about who controlled the story, and the Marshals would not tolerate a narrative that challenged theirs. Jasper folded his arms, gaze fixed on the horizon. "They'll return," he repeated, "and when they do, it won't be polite." Living under one roof was more dangerous than either of them had expected. Silver Creek was small enough that a new curtain in a window could become an afternoon conversation, small enough that if Jasper Colton, the solitary blacksmith, suddenly had a wife, every pair of eyes would notice. On the third day after the Marshals left, Violet insisted on going into town. "If I hide," she said, tying her bonnet with steady fingers, "they'll know something's wrong." Jasper hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep her inside the tree line, away from curious stares. But she was right. Fear drew attention. Normalcy concealed it. So they walked together. The general store fell silent when they entered. Conversations thinned into whispers. Violet felt the weight of it, measured, skeptical, invasive. "Mrs. Colton," the shopkeeper said slowly, as if testing the words. Violet forced a polite smile. "Yes, sir." She purchased flour and coffee, while women at the counter pretended not to stare. Jasper stood beside her, large and immovable, daring anyone to question what they saw. But suspicion lingered. By the time they left, Violet understood the truth. Pretending to be a wife meant being watched like one. That night she said quietly, "I'm putting you at risk." "You already did," Jasper replied without heat. "Now we manage it." The second blow came when she told him everything she remembered about the ledgers. "The books listed land parcels sold twice," she explained, seated at his small wooden table. "False signatures, bribes, payments marked in code." "And you memorized some of it?" Jasper asked. "Enough to recognize names." He leaned back, thinking, "If the originals are gone, we build new proof, not from paper, from people." "People are afraid," Violet said. "Not all of them," Jasper answered. "Corruption always leaves a trail of those cheated." It was a dangerous idea. Interviewing settlers meant drawing attention. Asking questions meant stirring dust that powerful men preferred buried. Within days, Jasper noticed a rider lingering near the edge of his property. Not a townsman, not a drifter, watching. "They've posted someone," he told Violet. Her stomach dropped. "Raymond? Or the marshal?" Inside tension coiled tighter. Violet struggled with guilt. Every hammer strike from Jasper's forge felt like another reminder that he had chosen this battle because of her. She offered to leave more than once. "Go where?" he asked bluntly. "Back into their hands?" She had no answer, and yet, amid danger, something unexpected grew. In the quiet of evenings, Violet cooked simple meals, while Jasper worked iron into shape. Once, when a spark caught his wrist and left a raw burn, she grabbed his hand without thinking, cooling it with water, or wrapping it in clean cloth. He watched her as she worked, not as a fugitive, not as a burden. "You don't have to take care of me," he said. "Yes," she replied softly. "I do." The words lingered. Later, by firelight, she confessed what she had never dared say aloud. "I'm tired of running, tired of being the easy one to blame." Jasper's jaw tightened. "Then we stopped running." Emotion made them vulnerable, attachment made them visible, and visible people could be used. The night the third test arrived, it came with hooves. Not one horse, several. The sound rolled through the trees and stopped outside the forge. Jasper rose slowly from his chair. "They didn't come alone," he said, "and this time they had brought someone with them." The knock did not come immediately. The riders dismounted first. Boots struck dirt. Spurs scraped against stone. The message was clear. They wanted the sound to travel. Violet stood in the center of the cabin, hands trembling despite her effort to remain steady. Jasper moved to the door, but did not open it yet. "They're performing," he said quietly. "That means they don't just want you." The knock came then, hard, deliberate. "Colton," a familiar voice called. "Open up." Jasper opened the door. 3 U.S. Marshals stood on the threshold, and beside them, smiling thinly beneath a dust-colored hat, stood Raymond Ames. Violet's breath caught in her throat. "Well," Raymond said smoothly, eyes sliding past Jasper to find her. "There she is, my wayward niece." "She's my wife," Jasper replied evenly. Raymond laughed. "Is that what she told you?" The lead marshal stepped forward. "We have reason to believe Violet Ames is harboring stolen federal documents and has fled lawful arrest." "She has neither," Jasper answered. Raymond tilted his head. "Careful, blacksmith. Lying to a federal officer is a serious offense." The words were meant for the crowd gathering down the road. Townsfolk had already begun drifting closer, drawn by raised voices. This was not a quiet arrest. It was a spectacle. Violet understood in a flash. They did not rush to seize her. They did not push inside. They were here to humiliate Jasper publicly, to strip his credibility in front of Silver Creek, to make him look like a fool protecting a criminal. If they could not take her easily, they would destroy him instead. The marshal's gaze sharpened. "Unless you'd like to explain why a former deputy from Wyoming is suddenly so protective." Violet's blood ran cold. Jasper did not move. Raymond's smile widened. There it was. They knew, or at least they suspected. The room seemed to shrink around them. If Jasper's identity surfaced, if anyone connected him to the deputy who once accused a superior of corruption, Silver Creek would not see a wronged lawman. They would see a fugitive. Violet's voice broke through the tension. "Leave him out of this. This is about me." Raymond looked pleased. "Oh, it's about much more than you." The marshal stepped closer to the doorway. "We're prepared to search the premises." Jasper shifted slightly, blocking the entrance fully now. "If you have a warrant signed by a judge," he said calmly, "present it." Silence. Raymond's jaw tightened. They did not have one, which meant they had come hoping intimidation would suffice. The marshal's eyes hardened. "You're making this difficult." "No," Jasper replied. "You are." Behind him, Violet felt something shift. This was the moment, the line drawn. If they pushed inside, everything would unravel. His past, her safety, any chance at justice. Jasper's voice dropped, low and steady. "You want her?" he said. "You go through me." The crowd had gathered fully now. Silver Creek was watching. Silver Creek had seen fistfights, drunken standoffs, and cattle disputes. But it had never seen this. The entire town stood in a widening circle before Jasper's forge. Shopkeepers, ranch hands, mothers holding children back by the shoulders. Word had traveled fast. U.S. Marshals had returned, and this time they had brought trouble with them. Violet stood just behind Jasper's shoulder. She could feel the heat from the forge at her back and the weight of 30 pairs of eyes pressing into her spine. Raymond removed his gloves slowly, theatrically. "Let's end this," he said. "Arrest her." The lead marshal stepped forward, and then another voice cut through the air. "That will not be necessary." Heads turned. Judge Samuel Morris rode in from the South Road, dust trailing behind his horse. He dismounted without hurry, carrying a folded document sealed in red wax. Raymond's confidence faltered for the first time. "Judge," the marshal said stiffly, "this is federal jurisdiction." "Corruption is always my jurisdiction," Judge Morris replied calmly. He stepped between Jasper and the marshals and unrolled the document. "I have concluded an independent inquiry into land acquisitions filed under Raymond Ames's authority in Denver and surrounding counties," the judge announced, loud enough for all to hear. Multiple signatures were forged, titles were altered, federal officials were bribed. A murmur swept the crowd. Raymond's face paled. "You can't prove that." "I already have," the judge replied, "and I have sworn affidavits from 2 clerks who were pressured to falsify reports." The marshal shifted uneasily. Judge Morris turned to him. "You will surrender your badge and sidearm, effective immediately." The silence was heavier than gun smoke. For a moment, no one moved. Then the second marshal, young, uncertain, slowly unpinned his badge and handed it forward. The lead marshal hesitated longer, but he removed his as well. Raymond's voice cracked. "This is absurd. She stole my books." Violet stepped forward before fear could reclaim her. "I did not steal from you," she said clearly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I tried to expose you." She turned so the town could see her face. "I was never running from the law. I was running from men who bought it." The words landed like a stone dropped in water. Jasper felt something inside him loosen, something he had carried for 10 years. Judge Morris nodded once. "Violet Ames is cleared of all charges. The accusations against her were fabricated to silence testimony." 2 deputies from the county line rode in moments later, summoned earlier by the judge's investigation. Raymond struggled as they took his arms. "You'll regret this," he shouted at Violet. "You're nothing without my name." She did not flinch. "I never needed it." As they led Raymond away, the former marshal avoided the townspeople's eyes. Silver Creek stood silent. Then someone near the back spoke quietly. She told the truth. Another voice followed. She wasn't lying. The crowd shifted, not with anger now, but with realization. Jasper finally stepped aside, not to surrender, but to stand beside her instead of in front of her. Judge Morris folded the warrant carefully. "Justice is slow," he said, "but it does arrive." For the first time since she had stumbled into town with fear in her lungs, Violet breathed without panic. They cuffed Raymond in front of the same people he had once dazzled with polished boots and confident promises. His protests faded as the deputies led him down Main Street, past the general store, past the hotel, past every face that had once believed him. The disgraced marshal followed in silence, badge gone, authority stripped away. For the first time, Silver Creek saw that a badge without integrity was just metal. No one cheered. Justice in the frontier was rarely loud. It was heavy. Violet stood still long after the horses disappeared in a cloud of dust. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from release. Months of running, hiding, doubting herself had drained out of her all at once. One by one, townspeople approached. Mrs. Hargrove from the bakery cleared her throat. "I suppose we misjudged you." A ranch hand removed his hat.
"By the power vested
"Sorry,
in me,
ma'am.
I declare this land
The
open for
apologies were
settlement according to
awkward,
the act of this
imperfect,
territory.
but
All
real."
previous claims are hereby
Violet
invalidated."
"Thank you." She did not ask them to feel guilty. She only wanted space to breathe. Jasper remained near the forge, quiet as always. He had not sought recognition, nor did he expect gratitude. Yet as he looked at the empty street, something shifted inside him. For years he had carried the weight of a false accusation, living half-hidden, convinced that stepping forward would only destroy him again. Today he had stepped forward, and the world had not ended. The forge fire burned lower as evening settled over Silver Creek. Jasper finally set his hammer down. The ringing of iron against steel faded into the cool dusk air. Violet moved beside him and sat on the worn wooden bench outside the workshop. For the first time since arriving, she was not scanning the horizon for riders. For the first time in a decade, Jasper was not scanning it for ghosts. The fire dimmed. The sky turned amber. And beside a cooling forge, 2 people who had once been running finally allowed themselves to feel still. In the West, the law was not always written in books. Sometimes it was written in the weight of a purse, in the silence of men who looked away. But every so often, someone stood in the doorway and said no. Jasper's lie had begun as protection, a single sentence spoken to stop a pair of handcuffs, yet that lie forced truth into the open. It reminded a town that justice is not whatever wears a badge, and that courage is not loud. It is steady. Violet had run from men who twisted the law to serve themselves. She survived because one person chose not to let fear decide for him. And sometimes that is all it takes to change the course of a story. In the frontier, a false marriage saved a life, and in time, that falsehood became the most honest thing either of them had ever claimed. Now, I want to ask you something. Where are you? And what are you doing as you reach the end of this story? Tell me in the comments.